English Daily, the podcast.
Your English journey starts now. Hey, English learners, welcome back to your podcast, the English Daily Podcast.
Yes, we're so happy to have you here today. This is going to be such an important episode.
Today's episode is all about sustainable supply chains and corporate responsibility, which is such an important topic for 2026 and beyond.
That's right, Anna, and we're going to make it really practical for you, especially if you work in business or want to improve your English for professional settings.
So, whether you're a beginner or already speaking well, you'll find something useful here. We're going to cover lots of vocabulary that you can actually use in meetings and discussions.
And not just that, but we'll also talk about real-world challenges, personal stories, and give you plenty of food for thought.
Let's dive right in. So, Jack, let's start by talking about why this topic matters so much in today's world. I mean, we've all heard about supply chains, but what exactly makes a supply chain sustainable?
Great question, Anna. You know, when I first learned about supply chains, I thought it was just about moving products from point A to point B, but it's so much more than that. A supply chain includes everything from sourcing raw materials to manufacturing, transportation, warehousing, and finally delivering the product to the customer. And now, companies are realizing that they need to think about the environmental and social impact at every single step. It's not just about efficiency anymore, it's about responsibility. Companies are waking up to the fact that their supply chains can have huge impacts on the planet and on people's lives.
That's really interesting. So, when we talk about a sustainable supply chain, what exactly are we referring to?
Well, a sustainable supply chain basically means that a company tries to minimize its negative impact on the environment while also considering the well-being of workers and communities throughout the entire process.
It's not just about being eco-friendly, although that's a huge part of it. It's also about ethical labor practices, fair wages, and making sure that local communities aren't harmed by business operations. It's really a holistic approach to business. You're thinking about the entire life cycle of your product, from raw materials all the way to end-of-life disposal.
I see. So, it's really about thinking holistically, right? Like, you can't just focus on profits. You have to consider the planet and people as well.
Exactly. And this is where corporate responsibility comes in. Companies are increasingly being held accountable for what happens not just within their own walls, but throughout their entire supply network. That's why we're seeing so much talk about ESG these days. It's becoming a fundamental part of how companies operate.
ESG. That's such an important term. Can you break that down for our listeners?
Of course, ESG stands for Environmental, Social, and Governance. It's basically a framework that investors and stakeholders use to evaluate how well a company is doing in terms of sustainability and ethical practices. The environmental part looks at things like carbon emissions, waste management, and resource usage. Companies are measuring their carbon footprints and setting targets to reduce them. The social aspect examines labor practices, diversity and inclusion, community relations, and human rights. Are workers being treated fairly? Are communities benefiting from business operations? And governance deals with corporate leadership, board diversity, transparency, and ethical decision-making. It's about how companies are run and who makes the decisions.
Wow, that's really comprehensive. And I imagine that companies are under a lot of pressure to improve their ESG scores nowadays, aren't they?
Absolutely. Investors are increasingly putting their money into companies with strong ESG performance. It's become a major factor in investment decisions. Consumers are also voting with their wallets, choosing brands that align with their values. And governments around the world are implementing stricter regulations. So it's becoming a business imperative, not just a nice-to-have. Companies that ignore ESG risks are really putting themselves at a disadvantage in the market.
That makes so much sense. Now, let's talk about some specific challenges that companies face when trying to build sustainable supply chains. What are some of the main obstacles?
Oh, there are so many challenges, Anna. One of the biggest is traceability.
Many companies have suppliers all over the world, sometimes in countries with less strict environmental or labor regulations. It can be really difficult to know what's happening at every step of the production process. I've read stories about major brands discovering forced labor in their supply chains only after journalists investigated. That's a huge problem. How can you fix problems if you don't even know they exist? Visibility is the first step toward improvement.
That's really troubling. And I imagine it must be expensive to implement sustainable practices as well, right?
It can be, yes. Switching to renewable energy, implementing better waste management systems, paying fair wages, all of these things cost money up front. And there's often a tension between being sustainable and being cost competitive. It can be hard to balance the books when you're trying to do the right thing. But here's the thing. More and more companies are finding that sustainable practices actually save money in the long run through increased efficiency and reduced waste. It's an investment that pays off over time. Energy efficiency, for example, reduces operational costs. Waste reduction means you're not throwing away money.
That's a great point. Now, let's think about some of the key terms that our listeners might encounter when reading about this topic or attending meetings about it. What are some important phrases they should know?
Oh, there are so many. Let's start with carbon footprint. That's such a common term. It refers to the total amount of greenhouse gases that are generated by a company's activities. Companies are constantly trying to reduce their carbon footprint through various initiatives like using renewable energy, improving transportation efficiency, or switching to electric vehicles. It's become a primary metric for environmental performance. Investors and customers both want to see companies making progress on this front.
Carbon footprint. Got it. And what about circular economy? I've heard that term a lot lately.
Great question. A circular economy is an economic system aimed at eliminating waste and the continual use of resources. Unlike the traditional linear economy where we make, use, and dispose, a circular economy is based on reuse, repair, refurbishment, and recycling. It's about creating closed-loop systems. It's about creating a closed-loop system where nothing is wasted, everything has value, and materials keep flowing through the economy rather than being thrown away.
That's such an important concept. Now, what about when companies are trying to work with their suppliers to improve sustainability? What term would they use?
They'd probably talk about supplier engagement or supplier collaboration. This refers to working closely with suppliers to help them improve their sustainability practices. It might involve providing training, sharing best practices, or even helping suppliers secure financing for green upgrades. Many large companies now require their suppliers to meet certain environmental and social standards. It's about building relationships and helping everyone in the supply chain improve together. No one can do this alone.
And what happens if a supplier doesn't meet those standards?
Well, that depends on the company. Some might give the supplier a chance to improve with a timeline, while others might terminate the relationship immediately. It's becoming more common for companies to have supplier codes of conduct that outline the minimum standards they expect, and these codes often include provisions for environmental compliance, labor rights, and ethical business practices. It's all about making sure everyone in the supply chain is playing by the same rules. There need to be consequences for not meeting standards.
That makes sense. Now, let's shift gears a bit and talk about some of the certifications and standards that companies might pursue. What are some common ones?
There are quite a few. ISO 14001 is a standard for environmental management systems. It provides a framework for managing environmental responsibilities. Fair trade certification ensures that products are sourced ethically and that producers receive fair compensation. It's especially common in coffee, chocolate, and other agricultural products. The Rainforest Alliance certification focuses on sustainable agriculture. B Corp certification is for companies that meet high standards of social and environmental performance. It can be overwhelming for companies to navigate all these different certifications, but they can really help demonstrate commitment to sustainability. They're like badges of honor.
That's a lot to take in. I think our listeners will find these terms really useful. Now, let's talk about why all of this matters from a business perspective. Why should companies actually care about sustainability?
Well, Anna, there are so many reasons. First of all, it's about risk management. Climate change, resource scarcity, and social instability are all business risks. Companies that ignore these issues are setting themselves up for problems down the road. Extreme weather events, supply disruptions, reputational damage, these can all be costly. Secondly, it drives innovation. When companies are forced to think about sustainability, they often come up with new products, services, and processes that give them a competitive edge. Thirdly, it attracts and retains talent. Today's workers, especially younger generations, want to work for companies that align with their values. It's becoming a key factor in recruitment.
That's so true. I've definitely seen that in my own circle of friends. Many of them won't even consider working for companies that don't have strong sustainability commitments.
And let's not forget about customer loyalty. Consumers are increasingly making purchasing decisions based on sustainability considerations. In fact, I've read studies showing that a significant percentage of consumers are willing to pay more for sustainable products. It's not just about the product anymore, it's about the values behind the product.
That's really interesting. Now, let's talk about some of the specific initiatives that companies might implement. What are some common approaches?
Oh, there are so many. Some companies are investing in renewable energy to power their operations. Others are electrifying their vehicle fleets to reduce emissions. Some are redesigning their products to use less material or to be more easily recyclable. Many are implementing circular economy principles in their business models. And a lot of companies are working on transparency, publishing detailed reports about their sustainability performance and setting ambitious targets for the future.
Transparency. That's such an important term. And I imagine it goes hand in hand with accountability, right?
Absolutely. Transparency means being open about your practices and performance. Accountability means being responsible for your actions and their consequences. Both are crucial for building trust with stakeholders. Investors, customers, and communities all want to know that companies are doing what they say they're doing. Many companies now publish annual sustainability reports that detail their progress, challenges, and future plans. These reports are often audited by third parties to ensure accuracy.
Now, let's think about some of the challenges that companies face when trying to communicate their sustainability efforts. What are some pitfalls they should avoid?
That's a great question. One big pitfall is what's sometimes called greenwashing. That's when a company makes misleading or exaggerated claims about its environmental friendliness. Like putting a green leaf on your product, even if it's not particularly sustainable. This can really damage a company's reputation if it's exposed. Another pitfall is focusing only on the environmental dimension while ignoring social and governance issues. True sustainability is about balance across all three ESG pillars.
Greenwashing. That's such an important term to know. And it's so unethical, right? Basically lying to consumers.
Well, it's not always intentional lying, Anna. Sometimes companies just pick the most favorable data points or use vague language that sounds good but doesn't mean much. But either way, it's misleading, and smart consumers are getting better at seeing through it. That's why transparency and third-party verification are so important.
Absolutely. Now, let's talk about some of the career opportunities in this space. What kinds of jobs are being created?
Oh, there are so many exciting career paths. There's sustainability consulting, where you help companies improve their practices. There's corporate sustainability management, where you oversee a company's ESG strategy. There are roles in supply chain sustainability, where you work with suppliers to improve their practices. There are jobs in impact investing, where you evaluate companies based on their sustainability performance. And there are roles in sustainability reporting and communications. The field is growing rapidly. It's becoming one of the hottest areas in business. There's never been a better time to get into this space.
That's really exciting. And I imagine that having strong English skills in this area would be a huge advantage, right?
Definitely. Many of the major companies and organizations in this space are international, and English is the lingua franca of global business. Being able to discuss these issues fluently in English opens up so many opportunities. Whether you're negotiating with suppliers, presenting to investors, or writing reports, English skills are essential in this field.
Well, that's exactly why we're here. Now let's take a little bit of time to reflect on some of the personal experiences that both of us might have had with this topic. Jack, do you have any stories?
Actually, yes. A few years ago, I was working with a small clothing company that wanted to become more sustainable. They were sourcing their cotton from various suppliers, and they had no idea where it was coming from or how it was being produced. We spent months mapping out their supply chain and talking to suppliers. It was a real eye-opener for them. They had no idea how complex their supply chain had become. In the end, they switched to organic cotton from a certified supplier, and they were able to communicate that to their customers. It really differentiated them in the market. Sales went up because customers valued their commitment.
That's a great story. I have one too. My sister works for a big tech company, and she told me that they now have a team specifically focused on supplier sustainability. They do regular audits and provide training to suppliers in developing countries. It's not just about checking boxes, it's about building capacity. She said it's made a real difference in the lives of the workers there. It's not just about compliance, it's about genuinely helping people improve their situations. It's really inspiring.
That's wonderful to hear. And that's really what corporate responsibility is all about. Not just meeting the minimum requirements, but actually making a positive difference in people's lives.
Absolutely. Now, let's move on to some vocabulary that our listeners should definitely add to their toolbox. We're going to break down some key phrases and terms that you'll encounter in this field.
Sounds great. Let's start with some essential vocabulary. This is where you'll really build your professional English skills.
First up, supply chain sustainability. This refers to the practice of managing the environmental, social, and economic impacts throughout the entire supply chain. Example, our company is committed to supply chain sustainability and works closely with all our suppliers to ensure ethical practices. This is such an important phrase because it shows that you're thinking about the big picture, not just your own operations.
Next term is carbon neutral. This means balancing the amount of carbon emissions produced with an equivalent amount being removed or offset. Example, our goal is to become carbon neutral by 2030 through a combination of emissions reductions and carbon offsets. You'll hear this term used a lot in corporate announcements. It's becoming a major goal for many companies to work toward.
Another important one, ethical sourcing. This means obtaining products and raw materials in a responsible and sustainable way, considering the welfare of people and the environment. Example, we only use ethical sourcing for our coffee beans, ensuring fair wages for farmers and sustainable farming practices. This is a term that consumers love to see on packaging. It shows that the company cares about more than just profits.
Let's add stakeholder engagement. This refers to the process of involving and communicating with individuals or groups who have an interest or stake in a company's activities. Example, our stakeholder engagement program includes regular meetings with investors, employees, and community members to discuss our sustainability initiatives. Stakeholder engagement is so important because it helps companies understand what matters most to the people affected by their decisions.
How about circular business model? This is a business approach that aims to eliminate waste and maximize resource efficiency by creating closed-loop systems. Example, We're transitioning from a linear business model to a circular one, where products are designed for longevity, repair, and recycling. This is such an innovative concept. It's about rethinking the entire way we do business, not just making small improvements.
Great one. Now let's talk about green procurement. This is the practice of purchasing products and services that have a reduced environmental impact. Example, our green procurement policy requires us to prioritize suppliers who offer environmentally friendly products and packaging. This is something that every department can get involved in, not just the sustainability team. Everyone can make better purchasing decisions.
Here's another triple bottom line. This concept measures a company's success based on three pillars: people, planet, and profit. Example, our reporting framework follows the triple bottom line approach, tracking our social, environmental, and financial performance. The triple bottom line is really about redefining what success looks like for a company. It's not just about money anymore.
Let's add life cycle assessment. This is a method of evaluating the environmental impacts of a product throughout its entire life cycle, from raw material extraction to disposal. Example, we conducted a life cycle assessment for our flagship product and discovered that most of its environmental impact came from the manufacturing phase. Life cycle assessment helps companies understand where the biggest environmental impacts are and where they should focus their improvement efforts.
How about sustainability reporting? This is the practice of publicly disclosing a company's environmental, social, and governance performance. Example, our annual sustainability report details our progress toward meeting our emission reduction targets and outlines our plans for the coming year. Sustainability reporting has become so standardized that there are now international frameworks like GRI and SASB that companies follow.
Let's add impact measurement. This refers to the process of quantifying the effects of a company's activities on the environment and society. Example, we use impact measurement tools to track how our community investment programs are making a real difference in people's lives. Impact measurement is crucial because it helps companies understand if their efforts are actually making a difference or if they need to change their approach.
Here's another important term: due diligence. This is the process of investigating and evaluating a potential business partner or investment to assess risks and opportunities. Example, our due diligence process includes thorough assessments of potential suppliers' environmental practices and labor standards. Due diligence is super important, especially when operating in unfamiliar markets or working with new suppliers. You need to know who you're getting into bed with.
Let's talk about materiality assessment. This is a process used to identify and prioritize the ESG issues that are most significant for a company and its stakeholders. Example, our materiality assessment revealed that climate change and workforce diversity are the top two sustainability priorities for our business. Impact measurement is crucial because it helps companies understand if their efforts are actually making a difference or if they need to change their approach.
How about net zero commitment? This is a pledge to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to as close to zero as possible, with any remaining emissions being balanced by removals. Example, we've made a net zero commitment that includes both reducing our direct emissions and working with our supply chain partners to address indirect emissions. Net zero is such an important goal, and it's becoming increasingly common to see companies make these commitments. It's the next frontier after carbon neutral.
Let's add Sustainable Development Goals. These are a set of 17 global goals established by the United Nations to address social and environmental challenges. Example, our corporate strategy is aligned with several of the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly those related to decent work and climate action. The SDGs provide a common language and framework for companies to contribute to global sustainability efforts. They're like a roadmap for a better world.
Here's another: Circularity rate. This measures the percentage of materials that are kept in the economy through reuse, repair, and recycling. Example, our goal is to increase our circularity rate from 15% to 40% over the next 5 years through product design and take-back programs. Tracking circularity rate helps companies measure progress toward a more circular economy. It's a metric that's gaining a lot of attention.
Let's talk about Scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. These are categories used to classify greenhouse gas emissions. Scope 1 covers direct emissions from owned or controlled sources. Scope 2 covers indirect emissions from purchased energy. Scope 3 covers all other indirect emissions in the value chain. Example, while we've made progress on reducing our Scope 1 and 2 emissions, our biggest challenge is tackling Scope 3 emissions from our supply chain. Understanding these different scopes is crucial for companies developing comprehensive climate strategies. Scope 3 is often the biggest source of emissions.
Here's another important term, deforestation-free supply chain. This means that a company's sourcing practices do not contribute to forest loss or degradation. Example, we've committed to a deforestation-free supply chain for our palm oil and soy products. This is especially important for companies in food, cosmetics, and other industries that rely on agricultural commodities. Deforestation is a huge environmental issue.
Let's add just transition. This refers to the shift to a sustainable economy in a way that is fair and inclusive, ensuring that workers and communities are not left behind. Example, our climate action plan includes a just transition component that focuses on retraining workers from fossil fuel industries. Just transition is about making sure that the move to a sustainable economy benefits everyone, not just some. It's a crucial social aspect of sustainability.
How about ESG integration? This is the practice of incorporating environmental, social, and governance factors into investment and business decision-making. Example, our investment committee has adopted ESG integration principles to ensure that sustainability risks are properly considered in all our investment decisions. ESG integration is becoming standard practice in the financial industry. It's changing how money flows through the economy.
Let's talk about science-based targets. These are emission reduction targets that are in line with the latest climate science and the Paris Agreement goals. Example, our emission reduction targets have been validated as science-based, meaning they are consistent with what scientists say is necessary to avoid the worst effects of climate change. Science-based targets are so important because they ensure that company efforts are actually contributing to global climate goals. It's not enough to just set arbitrary targets.
That was a fantastic vocabulary breakdown, Jack. I think our listeners now have a really solid foundation of terms to use in professional settings. Now, let's move on to some reflection questions that will help our listeners think more deeply about these topics.
Sounds great. Let's dive in. These questions are designed to help you apply what we've learned to your own life and career.
First question. Think about the products you buy regularly. Do you know where they come from and how they were made? If not, what steps could you take to find out more?
That's a great question to start with. I know that I personally have become more conscious about checking labels and doing a bit of research about the brands I support. It's not always easy, but every little bit helps. Sometimes just asking questions or looking for certification labels can give you a lot of information. It's about being an informed consumer in a complex world.
Absolutely. Now, second question, have you ever chosen to buy from a company specifically because of its sustainability practices? What factors influenced your decision?
I know I have. There are certain brands that I actively seek out because I know they have strong sustainability commitments, and I think it makes me feel better about my purchases too. It's like I'm voting with my wallet for the kind of world I want to live in. It's a powerful feeling knowing that your purchases align with your values.
That's a great mindset. Now, third question. What do you think are the biggest sustainability challenges in your country or industry? Are there any initiatives that you're aware of that are trying to address them?
That's a really interesting question. I think different industries face different challenges. For example, the fashion industry has issues with fast fashion and textile waste. There's so much clothing being produced and discarded. The food industry deals with issues like food waste and sustainable agriculture. The tech industry faces challenges related to rare earth mineral sourcing and e-waste. There are so many different aspects to consider. What about you, Anna? What challenges do you see in your industry?
Well, I work in marketing, and I think one of the big challenges is greenwashing. There's so much misinformation out there, and it can be hard for consumers to know what's genuine and what's just marketing spin. That's why I think transparency is so important. Companies need to be honest about their practices, even if they're not perfect yet. Progress over perfection.
Absolutely agree. Now, fourth question. How do you think sustainability will affect your career or job search in the future? Are there skills that you think will become more valuable?
That's such an important question. I think sustainability literacy is going to be important in almost every industry. Understanding ESG concepts, being able to analyze sustainability data, and communicating effectively about sustainability issues, these are all skills that will be in demand. Even if you're not working in a sustainability role directly, having this knowledge will make you a more valuable employee across any function.
Definitely. And it's not just about technical skills. Soft skills like stakeholder engagement, cross-cultural communication, and systems thinking will also be crucial. Companies need people who can bring people together and work toward common goals. Sustainability is ultimately about collaboration across boundaries.
I see. Fifth question. If you could influence one change in your company's supply chain practices, what would it be and why?
Oh, that's a tough one. I think I'd probably focus on transparency and traceability. I think if companies knew more about where their products came from, they'd be better positioned to make improvements. Knowledge is power, as they say. Once you have visibility into your supply chain, you can start making meaningful changes. You can't manage what you don't measure. What about you, Anna?
I think I'd focus on worker welfare. At the end of the day, we're talking about real people and real families. Ensuring fair wages and safe working conditions should be a priority for every company. It's easy to get caught up in the numbers and forget that there are human beings behind every product. Every item has a story.
That's such an important point. Sometimes in all the talk about carbon footprints and emissions, we can lose sight of the human element. But ultimately, sustainability is about people too. It's about creating a better world for everyone, not just for businesses. People should be at the center of sustainability efforts.
Absolutely. Now, sixth question. What role do you think governments should play in promoting sustainable supply chains? Should they regulate more or should they incentivize companies to change?
That's a great question, and I think it's a bit of both. Regulations set a baseline. They make sure that companies can't just ignore sustainability altogether. But incentives can help drive innovation and encourage companies to go above and beyond the minimum requirements. Ideally, you want a combination of both. Too much regulation can stifle innovation, but too little regulation allows bad actors to continue harmful practices. It's a delicate balance that governments are still figuring out.
Seventh question. How do you think consumer behavior needs to change to support more sustainable supply chains? Are there any habits that you think people should adopt?
I think one of the biggest changes is moving away from the mindset of always wanting more, more, more. Buying less but buying better, choosing quality over quantity, and being willing to pay a bit more for products that are made ethically and sustainably. But I also think we need to be patient with each other. Not everyone can afford to make sustainable choices all the time. It's about progress, not perfection, Every little bit helps, and we shouldn't judge each other for the choices we make.
That's such a thoughtful response. And I think it's important to remember that every small action adds up. We don't have to be perfect, we just have to try our best. And companies need to meet consumers halfway by making sustainable options more accessible and affordable for everyone.
Eighth question. What sustainability initiatives have you seen in your local community? Have you participated in any?
I've seen community gardens, recycling programs, local farmers markets, and even some community solar projects. I think it's great when communities come together to make a difference. I personally try to support our local farmers market whenever I can. It's a great way to reduce the carbon footprint of my food while supporting local producers.
That's wonderful. Small actions in our communities can really add up. There's something powerful about collective action at the local level. Now, ninth question. How do you think the concept of corporate responsibility has evolved over time? What do you think the future holds? I think corporate responsibility has come such a long way. It used to be just about philanthropy. Companies would donate money to charity and call it a day. But now it's much more integrated into core business strategy. Companies are realizing that they can't be successful in the long term if they're damaging the environment or treating their workers poorly. I think in the future we'll see even more integration, with sustainability becoming part of how every department operates, not just a separate sustainability team.
That's a great point. I think we're already seeing that shift where sustainability is becoming everyone's responsibility, not just a niche function. It's becoming part of the corporate DNA, which is really exciting to see. The next generation is demanding this change.
Exactly. And finally, 10th question. What one thing would you like to learn more about related to sustainable supply chains and corporate responsibility? What questions do you still have?
Oh, that's a great way to end. I'm personally really interested in learning more about how technology can help with sustainability tracking and transparency. Things like blockchain and AI seem really promising for improving supply chain visibility. It could help solve some of the traceability challenges we talked about earlier.
That's a fascinating area. There are so many exciting developments happening. Blockchain could help create immutable records of supply chain transactions, making it much harder for bad practices to hide. And AI can help analyze vast amounts of data to identify patterns and opportunities for improvement in real time.
Well, those were some really thoughtful questions, and I'm sure our listeners will enjoy reflecting on them.
Absolutely. These questions are designed to help you apply what you've learned to your own life and career. Take some time to think about your answers.
Absolutely. Now, let's wrap up today's episode. Jack, what are your final thoughts?
I think the key takeaway is that sustainable supply chains and corporate responsibility are not just buzzwords. They're becoming essential parts of modern business. Whether you're a student preparing for your career, a professional looking to advance, or just someone interested in making better choices as a consumer, understanding these concepts will serve you well in countless ways. And the good news is that you don't have to be an expert overnight. Just start learning, stay curious, and make conscious choices wherever you can. Every step counts.
That's beautifully said. And I hope you all feel more confident now when you encounter these terms in English language media. Knowledge is power. The more vocabulary you have, the more you can participate in these important conversations. And these are conversations that are shaping the future of business and our world.
Absolutely. And don't forget to check out our website for additional resources and practice materials. We've got exercises and quizzes that will help you practice using these new terms. We'll see you next time. Keep up the great work with your English learning journey.
Thanks so much for joining us today, everyone. We'll see you next time on the English Daily Podcast. Take care.
Bye for now. Remember to stay curious and keep learning.
See you next time.
Bye.
Your learning journey doesn't stop here. Keep improving your English. Click the next video or explore more episodes we've picked just for you. See you in the next lesson.